The Holy Gospel according to John. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up to the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near, and when he looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for all these people to eat?" Jesus said this to test Philip, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not be enough bread for each of them to even get a little. Now one of the other disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to Jesus, "There is a boy who here has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are those among so many?" Jesus answered, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, and they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, and also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Go gather up the fragments left over so that nothing may be lost." So the disciples gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that Jesus had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." And when Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into the boat, and started to cross the Sea of Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing, and when they had rowed for about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea, coming near the boat, and they were terrified. But Jesus said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." And then they wanted to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the land toward where they were going. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on the journey of faith, know that you are most welcome here to receive the richness of God's love given for you. Can you remember the last time you talked so much that you lost your voice, or at least it got a little hoarse? I like to imagine Jesus was at this point when we find him in our gospel story for today. Because honestly, no good deed goes unpunished, right? For context, just yesterday, Jesus had healed a lame man, which normally would be good news. But he did it on the Sabbath, which made it bad news when the chief priests got wind of it, and it already fueled their already hot fire to get rid of Jesus violently. So then Jesus gets into this terribly long discussion with those same chief priests, talking until he's blue in the face about how he's just doing his Father's work in the world, regardless of what day it is, and how God has sent him to be the answer to their deepest needs and fears. I also imagine Jesus felt like he was talking to a brick wall. And after all of that talking with his voice hoarse, he went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus probably wanted a little time and space away. The problem is, at this point, Jesus couldn't keep a low profile. Local townspeople started heading out to find him, to the point where 5,000 men, which actually meant more like 15,000 men, women, and children, were gathered. Jesus had needed some time away, and yet all these people had needs of their own. They were sick, and they were sad, and they were hungry, and while anyone else but the Son of God would have told them to get lost, Jesus has compassion on them. So Jesus looks out at this whole crowd, and as he's doing this, the disciples start to get more and more antsy as time ticks by, especially Philip, which is probably why Jesus asks him point blank, "Hey, where are we going to get the food to feed all these good folks?" Philip's answer is, I don't know where, but it's not here. We don't have what is needed. Their hunger, their need is too big, too much for us. Philip's answer is that we have nothing. It just so happens that nothing is God's favorite material to work with. And it turns out that nothing in this case actually looked like one brave youth who knew enough to know that everyone has something to offer, something to share, something to contribute in God's economy. And the youth's nothing was 5 loaves and 2 fish. So Jesus says, bring your nothing to me. Jesus blessed that nothing with full confidence that with God, it's going to be enough. And Jesus then sends the disciples out to distribute the food. It's a good story for us to hear and to remember that sometimes Jesus' answer to our questions, our prayers, our intercessions about the needs in the world is you do something about it. We might even push the issue further, hearing Jesus say, I've provided you with food, you get to distribute it. I've provided you with money, you get to donate some of it. I've provided you with time and ability and skills, you get to use them for someone else. Now, by the time this sermon is scheduled to be viewed this coming week, a group of Lutheran youth and their adults from Calvary, Clarkston, Antioch, Farmington Hills, Christ, Waterford, and hopefully 1 or 2 more congregations, we're going to be gathering tonight to start together a week of service called Voice of Truth, based out of Calvary, Clarkston. Now, to the outside world, our group is going to have a whole lot of nothing. In the face of so much need in our corner of Michigan, all we have is a few dozen unskilled people, teenagers nonetheless. And do you know what we're going to do at opening worship tonight? We're going to put our little group, our little pieces of bread and fish in Jesus' hand and ask that he use us to be part of a miracle. And I have no doubt that it is exactly what Jesus is going to do this week. Because hours upon hours of work will be given either at community gardens or community orchard, at food pantries, and other local agencies that walk alongside those in the margins. And we will do these things so that we can be reminded over and over and over of the miracle that with God there is enough for all. That in God's kingdom, no one is forgotten, no one is unimportant to God, no one is completely empty of gifts to share. Some of you might be thinking, but those aren't miracles. That's just people, kids being generous, sharing what they have even when it isn't much. That's not a miracle. Preacher Barbara Brown Taylor comments that the problem with miracles is that we tend to get mesmerized by them, focusing on God's action and forgetting our own. In that scenario, miracles get us off the hook. And they appeal to the part of us that is too happy to let God feed the crowd, to save the world, to do it all. Because what we have to offer is not enough to make any difference really at all. So we hold back and we wait for a miracle, looking after our own needs and looking for God to help those who cannot help themselves. And yet Jesus' voice breaks through that thought pattern saying, you get to give them something to eat. Not me, but you. Your bread that I blessed. Not sometime or somewhere else, but right here and right now. Stop waiting for food to fall out of the sky and you get to share what you have. Stop waiting for the miracle and participate in one instead. May we all hear the good news that Jesus is speaking to us this morning. Bring what you have to me. No matter what you have, how much or how little, bring it to me and believe it is enough to get a miracle started. Dear ones, may you go into this week with eyes to see that Jesus, our bread of life that sustains us always, is ready to show up when you think there is nothing, and how with the promises of Jesus there will be enough for you and for me and the whole world. Thanks be to God. Amen.